All right, good morning. We're reading again from the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice. 10 minutes of reading a day, and I must confess that I'm going to try to get away from the cold reading and try to pre-read so that I have some idea of what's coming. That way you'll know that, in fact, I really can't read very well. So anyway, we're starting episode 14, 6-9 of 21 today. Page 47 is where we're starting. This is chapter 6, Josiah Warren, From True Civilization, An Immediate Necessity, and the Last Ground of Hope for Mankind, 1863. And here's the intro by the author or organizer, Michael Malice. America in the 19th century was a truly odd place, with many varied social experiments occurring throughout the vast, quickly growing nation. Among them was Josiah Warren's utopian community, Modern Times, on New York's Long Island. Warren took the labor theory of value seriously and advocated for an economics under his slogan of, quote, cost the limit of price. He decreed the price of an item should not be set by the market, but by how much work went into producing it, and even issued currency based on hours worked to his followers. As America was ripping itself in half, brother slaughtering brother in the Civil War, Warren was denouncing the state's authority in his book, True Civilization. So here we go. Government and its true function. 1. With all due deference to other judgments, I venture to assert that our present deplorable condition, like that of many other parts of the world, is in consequence of the people in general never having perceived, or else having lost sight of, the legitimate object of all governments as displayed or implied in the American, quote, Declaration of Independence. 2. Every individual of mankind has an, quote, inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it is solely to protect and secure the enjoyment of these rights, unmolested, that governments can properly be instituted among men. In other terms, self-sovereignty is an instinct of every living organism, and it being an instinct cannot be alienated or separated from that organism. It is the instinct of self-preservation. The votes of 10,000 men cannot alienate it from a single individual, nor could the bayonets of 20,000 men neutralize it in any one person any more than they could put a stop to the instinctive desire for food in a hungry man. 3. The action of this instinct being involuntary, everyone has the same absolute right to its exercise that he has to his complexion or the forms of his features, to any extent not disturbing another. And it is solely to prevent or restrain such disturbances or encroachments that governments are properly instituted. In still shorter terms, the legitimate and appropriate mission of governments is the defense and protection of the inalienable right of sovereignty in every individual within his or her own sphere. But what is it that constitutes encroachment? 4. Suppose my house to be on fire, and I seize a pail of water in the hands of a passerby, without waiting to explain or ask leave. This would be one degree of encroachment, but perhaps the owner would excuse it on the grounds of its necessity. Suppose a man walks into my house without waiting for leave. It may or may not disturb or offend me or constitute a degree of encroachment. If I find that he has no excusable errand and require him to retire and he refuses, this would be a degree of encroachment which I might meet with a few words and might need no government to assist me. If he proceeds to rob the house, I may have reason to think that he is driven to desperation by having a starving family, and I may not resort to violence, or I may perceive that he is a wanton and reckless robber or filibuster, and that this is an unnecessary encroachment, which, in defense of my own rights, as well as the same rights in others, I am justifiable in resisting. And if I have not sufficient power to do so without endangering myself or property, I will call for help. This help, whether in the form of police or an army, is government, and its function is to use force, to prevent him from using force against me and mine. It interferes with my consent to prevent interference with my sovereign right to control my own. Its mission is, quote, intervention for the sake of non-intervention. 5. If he has already got possession of my purse, I should want him to be compelled, without any unnecessary violence, to give it up, and perhaps to compensate the police. Until I had learned better, I might have approved of his being confined in prison till he had done this, and compensated me for being disturbed. But there are objections to proceeding to these complicated measures. There is no principle generally known by which to determine what constitutes compensation. He could not get properly compensated for his work, which might be a greater injustice to him than he had done to me, and it would inflict on his innocent father, mother, brothers and sisters, his wife and children, and all his friends, incalculable injustice and suffering, and this would be no compensation to me. Besides, I, as a citizen of the same world, am a partner in the crime by not having prevented the temptation to it. 6. With all these considerations against pursuing him further, I think it the best present expedient to put up with the restoration of my purse, as he gains nothing to tempt the continuance of the business. The word expedient may look loose and unsatisfactory, but among all the works of mankind there is nothing higher than expedience. 7. The instinct of self-preservation or self-sovereignty is not the work of man, but to keep it constantly in mind as a sacred right in all human intercourse is highly expedient. 8. Perceiving that we can invent nothing higher than expedience, we necessarily set aside all imperative or absolute authorities, all sanguinary and unbending codes, creeds, and theories, and leave every one free, that's with a capital F in the book, to choose among expedients. Or, in other words, we place all action upon the voluntary basis. Do not be alarmed. We shall see this to be the highest expedient whenever it is possible. It is only when the voluntary is wantonly encroached upon that the employment of force is expedient or justifiable. 10. It appears, however, that no rule or law can be laid down to determine beforehand what will constitute an offensive encroachment. What one will resist, another will excuse, and the subtle diversities of different persons and cases, growing out of the inherent individualities of each, have defied all attempts at perfect formalizing, excepting this of the sovereignty of every individual over his or her own. And even this must be violated in resisting its violation. 11. The legitimate sphere of every individual has never been publicly determined, but until it is clearly defined, we can never tell what constitutes encroachment, what may be safely excused, or what may be profitably resisted. 12. We will attempt then to define the sphere within which every individual may legitimately, rightly exercise supreme power or absolute authority. This sphere would include his or her person, time, property, and responsibilities. 13. By the word right is meant simply that which necessarily tends toward the end in view. The end in view here is permanent and universal peace and security of person and property. I have said, in effect, that the present confusion and widespread violence and destruction result from a want of appreciation of this great right of in caps, individual sovereignty, and its defense by government. 15. I now proceed to illustrate and prove this by considering what would be the natural consequences of bearing these two ideas all the time in mind as the regulators of political and moral movements and holding them, as it were, as substitutes for all previous laws, customs, precedents, and theories. First then, while admitting this right of sovereignty in everyone, I shall not be guilty of the ill manners of attempting to offensively enforce any of my theoretical speculations, which has been the common error of all governments. This itself would be an attempted encroachment that would justify resistance. 17. The whole mission of coercive government being the defense of persons and property against offensive encroachments, it must have force enough for the purpose. This force necessarily resolves itself into the military, for the advantages of drill and systematic cooperation, and this being perhaps the best form that government can assume, while a coercive force is needed. I make no issue with it, but only with the misapplications of its immense power. And we'll stop right there. On page 50, again, of chapter 6, Josiah Warren, From True Civilization, An Immediate Necessity and the Last Ground of Hope for Mankind, written in 1863. A chapter of the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice. You should get one. Thank you.